We're taking your brother instead. He deserves this more than you, my dad said casually over the phone, as if he was discussing the weather. I felt my stomach drop, but I forced my voice to remain steady. You're always flying around for work anyway. Noah needs this break. I gripped the phone tighter, staring at the wall of my Charlotte apartment, where I'd pinned the detailed itinerary I'd spent months creating. First-class flights to London, 5-star hotels in Paris, private tours through Rome, all of it paid for with my own money, planned with meticulous care to thank the 2 people who had supported my career as a graphic designer. That's okay, Dad, I heard myself say, surprising even me with how calm I sounded. I hope you both have a wonderful time. My name is Vanessa Cortez, and I'm 33 years old. For the past 8 years, I've built a successful career designing marketing materials for Embergate Travel, one of the premier travel agencies in the Southeast. My work takes me around the country for client meetings and industry conferences, which my family has always seen as glamorous jet-setting, rather than the demanding professional commitment it actually is. The irony wasn't lost on me that my expertise in luxury travel had helped me plan what was supposed to be the perfect family vacation. 3 weeks in Europe, visiting London, Paris, and Rome. I'd used every connection I had to secure reservations at the most exclusive hotels, arranged private guided tours, and even booked us into Michelin-starred restaurants that typically had 6-month waiting lists. This trip was meant to be my gift to my parents, Harold and Patricia Cortez, who had worked double shifts at the textile factory for 20 years to put me through design school. While my brother Noah had dropped out of college after 1 semester and had been living in their basement ever since, they'd never stopped believing in my dreams. At least that's what I'd thought until 3 days ago. Now, as I hung up the phone, I felt something cold settle in my chest. Not anger exactly, but a strange clarity. They wanted to take Noah instead. The same Noah who hadn't held a steady job in 5 years? The same Noah who borrowed money from them constantly and never paid it back? The same Noah who had mocked my career choice, calling it making pretty pictures for rich people. Fine. They could take their precious son on the trip I'd planned and paid for. But what they didn't realize was that every single reservation, every hotel check-in, every tour booking required one thing they didn't have: my identification. My name was on everything, and in the luxury travel world, that meant everything. I walked to my laptop and opened my travel planning folder, a small smile playing at my lips for the first time in days. Growing up, the favoritism in our family wasn't subtle. While I spent my teenage years working part-time jobs to save for art supplies and college applications, Noah was given a car for his 16th birthday that he crashed within 3 months. When I graduated valedictorian and received a partial scholarship to design school, the family celebration lasted 1 evening. When Noah announced he was taking a gap year that turned into 5 years, my parents called it finding himself. I'd learned early that proving my worth meant working twice as hard for half the recognition. After college, I started at Embergate Travel as a junior designer, staying late every night to perfect my layouts and build client relationships. Within 3 years, I'd been promoted to senior designer, and by year 5, I was leading the creative department for our luxury travel division. My success had always been met with a mixture of pride and resentment from my family. My mother, Patricia, would brag to her friends about my accomplishments, but always with a disclaimer. Of course, she's so busy with work, we hardly see her anymore. My father, Harold, was more direct in his disapproval. All that education, and for what? You work all the time and don't have a husband or children. What's the point? But Noah? Noah was still their baby, even at 31. His unemployment was the tough job market. His inability to maintain relationships was because he was too sensitive for this world. His constant need for financial support was just temporary. Always temporary. I'd planned this European vacation specifically to show them how much their support had meant to me, despite everything. I wanted to give them experiences they'd never dreamed of having. The presidential suite at the Langham in London, a private Seine River cruise in Paris, VIP access to the Vatican in Rome. Each detail had been carefully chosen to create memories that would last a lifetime. The planning had taken 6 months. I'd used my industry connections to secure reservations that money alone couldn't buy. My contact at the Langham had pulled strings to get us the same suite where British royalty stayed. The restaurant in Paris that I'd booked for our last night had a 2-year waiting list, but the chef remembered me from a travel industry event and made an exception. Every confirmation email, every reservation number, every special request was filed under my name and linked to my passport information. In the luxury hospitality world, this wasn't just a formality, it was essential security protocol. These establishments catered to high-profile clients who valued privacy and exclusivity above all else. As I scrolled through my meticulously organized files, I realized that my parents' last-minute substitution wasn't just hurtful, it was logistically impossible. They would arrive in London expecting to check into hotels where the staff would have no record of Harold or Noah Cortez. They would show up for private tours that were booked exclusively for Vanessa Cortez and confirmed guests. The trip they thought they were taking existed only in their imagination. The real trip belonged to me, and me alone. The morning after my father's phone call, I sat in my office at Embergate Travel, staring at my computer screen with a cup of coffee growing cold in my hands. My colleague and closest friend, Brooke Mitchell, knocked on my office door frame. "You look like someone stole your favorite design software," she said, settling into the chair across from my desk. "What's going on?" I explained the situation, watching Brooke's expression shift from confusion to outrage. She'd met my family at office holiday parties over the years and had witnessed firsthand how they treated me compared to Noah. "Wait, let me get this straight," Brooke said, leaning forward. "You planned and paid for an entire luxury European vacation for your parents, and they decided to take your deadbeat brother instead." "That about sums it up," I replied, surprised by how detached I felt from the words. "And everything is booked under your name?" "Everything. Hotels, tours, restaurant reservations, even the private driver service I arranged for ground transportation." Brooke was quiet for a moment, then a slow grin spread across her face. "You know what this means, right? That my family will have a very disappointing vacation?" "Vanessa, this is perfect. You have complete control over this situation." She pulled out her phone and started typing. "You know what you should do? Take that trip yourself. You've earned it more than anyone." The idea hadn't occurred to me, but as soon as she said it, I felt a surge of excitement. Why shouldn't I enjoy the vacation I'd planned and paid for? I'd been working nonstop for months, and I had the time off already approved. "I can't just abandon them in Europe," I said, though even as I spoke, I knew I was trying to convince myself more than her. "They abandoned you first," Brooke pointed out. "They made their choice. Now you get to make yours." That afternoon, I made a series of phone calls. First, I contacted each hotel to confirm that my identification would be required for check-in, explaining that there had been some confusion about the guest list. The concierge at the Langham was particularly helpful, noting in their system that only I was authorized to make changes to the reservation. Next, I called the tour companies to reconfirm that their private guides would only recognize me as the client contact. The Vatican tour coordinator was especially strict about this, explaining that their exclusive access required background checks that were tied to specific passport numbers. Finally, I booked myself a flight to Iceland, a destination I'd always wanted to visit but never had time for. I found a gorgeous suite at a boutique hotel in Reykjavik with views of the Northern Lights. It would be my own private celebration, far from the drama my family was about to encounter. As I finalized my Iceland reservations, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years, complete peace with my decisions. For once, I was putting myself first, and it felt absolutely liberating. 3 days later, my parents and Noah departed for London on the first-class flights I'd booked. I watched their social media posts from my apartment, seeing my mother's excited selfies at the airport and my father's proud photos of Noah in his first-class seat. The seat that should have been mine. Living our best life. My mother had captioned a photo of the three of them in the airport lounge. So grateful for this amazing opportunity. No mention of who had made that opportunity possible, of course. I was scheduled to fly to Iceland the next morning, giving me a full day to make some final adjustments to their European adventure. I spent the morning calling each establishment on their itinerary, not to cancel, that would be too obvious, but to clarify their very strict identification policies. Just to confirm, I said to the manager at Le Bristol in Paris, if someone shows up claiming to be checking in for the Cortez reservation, but doesn't have matching identification, you won't be able to accommodate them, correct? Absolutely not, Miss Cortez, he replied crisply. Given the level of security we maintain for our VIP guests, we cannot make any exceptions. Only the person whose name and passport match our reservation will be granted access. I made similar calls to the hotel in Rome, the private tour companies, and even the Michelin-starred restaurants. Each conversation confirmed what I already knew. My family was about to discover that luxury travel operates on a completely different level than their usual vacation planning. By evening, I felt a strange mix of anticipation and melancholy. Part of me hoped they would somehow figure it out, call me, apologize, and ask me to join them. But my phone remained silent, except for their continued social media updates from their overnight flight. The next morning, I boarded my own flight to Reykjavik with a lightness I hadn't felt in months. As the plane lifted off from Charlotte, I turned off my phone and allowed myself to truly relax for the first time since this whole situation began. Meanwhile, my family was landing at Heathrow Airport, completely unaware of what awaited them. I learned later what happened from a series of increasingly frantic voicemails they left on my phone, which I didn't check until I was safely ensconced in my Icelandic hotel suite. The first message was from my mother, recorded at 3 p.m. London time. Honey, there's been some sort of mix-up at the hotel. They're saying they don't have a reservation for us, even though we have the confirmation email you sent. Can you call them and sort this out? The second message, an hour later, was from my father. Vanessa, this is ridiculous. We've been to 3 hotels now, and all of them are claiming they only have a reservation for you. Obviously, there's been some computer error. We need you to fix this immediately. By 6 p.m., Noah had left his own message, and for the first time in years, he wasn't speaking to me with his usual condescending tone. Vanessa, look, I know we haven't always gotten along, but we're really stuck here. Can you please help us figure out what's wrong with these reservations? We're tired, we're frustrated, and honestly, we don't know what to do. The messages continued throughout their first day in London. They'd tried showing up at the Langham with printed confirmations, but the concierge politely explained that without my passport and physical presence, they could not access the reservation. The same thing happened at every backup hotel they tried. By their second day, the tone of the messages had shifted from confusion to panic. They'd spent the night in a budget hotel near the airport that had cost them more than they'd ever spent on accommodation before. Their romantic European adventure was turning into an expensive nightmare. Vanessa, we don't understand what's happening. My mother's voice was tearful on message number 12. We just need you to call us back. Please. We're your parents. But I was busy enjoying the most peaceful vacation of my adult life, watching the northern lights dance across the Icelandic sky from my private hot tub, finally understanding what it meant to put myself first. By day 3 of their European adventure, my family's social media posts had taken on a decidedly different tone. Gone were the excited selfies and grateful captions. Instead, there were frustrated posts about travel company incompetence and vacation disasters. I was exploring the stunning Gullfoss waterfall when I finally checked my phone and found 27 missed calls and 41 text messages. The progression of their messages told a story of increasing desperation. Day 1 in London. Small hiccup with hotel reservations, but we're figuring it out. Day 2 in Paris. Having trouble with our accommodations again. Seems like there's some issue with the booking system. Day 3, also in Paris. This trip has been a complete disaster. Nothing is working the way it's supposed to. The most telling message came from Noah, sent at 2 a.m. Paris time. Vanessa, I know you're mad at us, but this isn't fair. Mom and Dad spent their entire vacation fund on flights to get here, and now we're stuck staying in hostels because nothing else is available. Please just tell us how to access the hotels you booked. I sat on a bench overlooking the waterfall, reading message after message, and felt something I didn't expect, a tiny pang of guilt. But then I remembered my father's dismissive tone when he'd called to uninvite me from my own vacation. He deserves this more than you. The guilt evaporated quickly. The truth was, they had options. They could have called me on day one, apologized, and asked for help. I might have been willing to work something out. But instead, they'd assumed they could simply take over my carefully planned vacation without consulting me. And when things went wrong, their first instinct was to demand that I fix their mess rather than acknowledge their mistake. Their messages revealed just how little they understood about the vacation I'd planned. They'd tried to check into hotels by showing confirmation emails on their phones, not realizing that luxury establishments required the original cardholder to be present. They'd shown up for private tours expecting to be welcomed with open arms, not understanding that exclusive services were booked specifically for individual clients. The restaurant reservations were perhaps the most telling example of their misunderstanding. They'd arrived at Le Jules Verne in the Eiffel Tower, expecting to be seated for the dinner I'd booked. When the maitre d' explained that the reservation was specifically for Mademoiselle Cortez and her party, and that without her presence they could not honor the booking, Noah had apparently caused a scene. He demanded to speak to the manager, my mother had texted. He told them we were your family and that should be enough. They were very polite but firm. We ended up eating at a cafe that cost us €80 for sandwiches. Reading this, I actually laughed out loud, startling a group of Icelandic ponies grazing nearby. Noah, who had spent years mocking my work in the travel industry, had just learned firsthand how that industry actually operated. Connections and relationships mattered. Reputation and trust were everything. You couldn't simply show up and expect to receive services that had been carefully arranged for someone else. By day 4, their messages had become increasingly accusatory. My father's text at 3 a.m. was particularly harsh. This is childish, Vanessa. We raised you better than this. Your mother is crying because we can't even afford to change our flights home. We're stuck here for 6 more days with nowhere to stay and no money left. But that final message revealed something important. They still hadn't once acknowledged that they'd done anything wrong. They hadn't apologized for excluding me from the trip I'd planned and paid for. They were only sorry that their plan to take advantage of my generosity hadn't worked out the way they'd expected. On my 5th day in Iceland, I was soaking in the Blue Lagoon when I received a call from an international number I didn't recognize. Against my better judgment, I answered. Miss Cortez? This is James Wellington from the concierge desk at the Langham London. I hope I'm not disturbing you. Not at all, James. How can I help you? Well, this is rather delicate, but we've had some individuals claiming to be your family members attempting to access your reservation for the past 4 days. They've become quite insistent, and frankly, rather aggressive with our staff. I felt my cheeks warm, and not just from the geothermal water. I'm so sorry about that. I should have contacted you directly to let you know I wouldn't be honoring that reservation. No need to apologize, Miss Cortez. We're quite accustomed to handling these situations. However, I wanted to ask if you'd like us to continue our current policy of not acknowledging any connection to your reservation when they return. The question hung in the air. James was essentially asking if I wanted to maintain my family's suffering, or if I was ready to show mercy. For a moment, I considered telling him to help them, to transfer the reservation somehow. But then I remembered not just the phone call that had started this, but years of similar treatment. Every family dinner where Noah's failures were excused, while my successes were minimized. Every holiday where I was expected to be grateful for the bare minimum, while Noah received praise for showing up at all. I appreciate your discretion, James. Please continue with your current approach. Very good, Miss Cortez. I hope you're enjoying your time in Iceland. After hanging up, I realized that someone at the Langham had clearly done their research to track me down in Iceland, probably noting my social media posts or using their industry connections. The fact that they'd reached out showed just how difficult my family had been for their staff. That evening, I received a different type of message. My mother had somehow gotten hold of my work email and sent me a long, rambling note that started with anger but descended into something close to pleading. Vanessa, I don't know what's gotten into you, but this needs to stop. Your father and I have spent our entire retirement savings on this trip, and Noah took unpaid time off from his new job to come with us. We're staying in horrible places and eating terrible food because we can't afford anything decent. I know we should have talked to you before making the change, but we thought you'd understand. Noah has been so depressed lately, and we thought this might help him get back on his feet. Please, just tell us how to access one hotel reservation. Just one night in a decent place. That's all we're asking. Reading this message, I finally understood what had really happened. This wasn't just about favoritism or last-minute changes. My parents had genuinely believed that they could take my vacation and give it to Noah as some sort of therapy for his chronic underachievement. They'd seen my carefully planned European adventure, not as a gift I was giving them, but as a resource they could redistribute to their more needy child. The realization was both clarifying and infuriating. They hadn't just excluded me from the trip. They'd tried to turn my success into Noah's rehabilitation program without my consent. I closed the email without responding and booked myself another night at my Icelandic retreat. They could figure out their own solutions. On my final day in Iceland, I made a decision that surprised even me. Instead of continuing to ignore my family's increasingly desperate messages, I called my father directly. Vanessa. His voice was hoarse with exhaustion. Thank God. We've been trying to reach you for a week. I know, Dad. I've been getting your messages. Then why haven't you called us back? We're stranded here. We can't afford to stay anywhere decent, and Noah is talking about borrowing money just to eat. I looked out at the Reykjavik harbor from my hotel suite, watching fishing boats bring in their morning catch. Dad, I need you to explain something to me. When you called to uninvite me from this trip, did you think about how the reservations actually worked? There was a long pause. What do you mean? I mean, did you think about the fact that everything was booked under my name, with my credit card, requiring my identification to access? Another pause, longer this time. We thought you could just call and change the names or something. At 5-star hotels, at Michelin-starred restaurants with year-long waiting lists, at private tour companies that do background checks on their clients. I kept my voice calm, almost conversational. Dad, you work in manufacturing. Would you let someone walk into your factory and take over a custom order just because they claim to be related to the person who placed it? That's different. No, it's not. It's exactly the same. The vacation you thought you were taking never existed. You can't just transfer luxury travel reservations like a dinner reservation at Applebee's. I could hear him breathing heavily. So what are we supposed to do? You're supposed to figure it out the same way any other tourists would. Book your own hotels, make your own restaurant reservations, plan your own activities. With what money? We spent everything on the flights. The same way I would have had to if you'd called me a month ago instead of 3 days before departure to tell me I wasn't invited to my own vacation. For the first time in the conversation, my father was silent. Vanessa, please. My father's voice cracked. Your mother hasn't stopped crying since yesterday. Noah is talking about just going home early and losing the money on the return flights. We know we made a mistake. Those were the words I'd been waiting to hear for 7 days. But when they finally came, they felt hollow. What mistake did you make, Dad? We should have talked to you first before making the change. That's not the mistake you made. Silence. The mistake you made was assuming that my life, my work, my planning, and my money were resources that you could redistribute to Noah whenever you felt he needed them more than I did. The mistake you made was telling me that he deserved this more than I did, as if I hadn't earned every dollar I spent on this trip. I could hear my mother crying in the background now. You want to know the really sad part, Dad? If you had called me and explained that Noah was struggling, if you had asked me to help plan a separate trip for him, I probably would have done it. I love our family, even when you make it difficult. But instead, you tried to take something that belonged to me and give it to him, like I was just a bank account you could access whenever convenient. We didn't mean it that way. Yes, you did. You've always meant it that way. Every time Noah failed at something and you made excuses for him while expecting me to just work harder and ask for less, you meant it exactly that way. I hung up the phone and blocked their numbers. I was done being their emergency fund and backup plan. I was done being the responsible one who fixed everyone else's mistakes while my own needs were dismissed. For the first time in my adult life, I belonged to myself. 6 months later, my parents and Noah returned to Charlotte, having spent the remainder of their European adventure in budget accommodations and eating at fast food restaurants. They'd managed to see some sights and take some photos, but their luxury vacation had become an expensive lesson in assumption and entitlement. My mother tried to reach out through relatives, sending messages about how much they missed me and wanted to repair our relationship. But every message focused on their desire for reconciliation, rather than acknowledgement of what they'd done wrong. They wanted forgiveness without accountability, restoration without change. I, meanwhile, had used the peace and clarity of my Iceland retreat to make some major life decisions. I'd started freelancing on the side, building a client base of high-end travel companies who valued my expertise and industry connections. Within 4 months, I was earning more from freelance work than from my full-time job. When Embergate Travel offered me a promotion to creative director, I turned it down and submitted my resignation instead. My freelance business, Wanderlust Design Studios, was ready to launch with 3 major clients already signed. Brooke, who had become my business partner in the new venture, often asked if I regretted how things had played out with my family. The answer was always no. The Iceland trip had taught me something invaluable, that putting myself first wasn't selfish. It was necessary. I'd spent 33 years trying to earn love and respect from people who would never value me the way I deserved. Now I was building a life surrounded by clients and colleagues who appreciated my skills, respected my boundaries, and understood that relationships should be built on mutual regard rather than one-sided sacrifice. My parents still lived in Charlotte, and Noah still lived in their basement. They'd learned nothing from their European disaster, except that I was more capable of standing up for myself than they'd ever imagined. In a strange way, I was grateful for that discovery. Sometimes you have to lose everything you thought you wanted to realize what you actually needed. As I reflected on my journey from that painful phone call to building my own successful business, I understood that the best revenge hadn't been leaving them stranded in Europe. It had been learning to value myself enough to walk away from people who refused to see my worth,